There are 13 different reticle colors that you can have in Rainbow Six Siege as of right now. With Operation Shadow Legacy, you've now got a wide variety to pick from. Unless that is you like to run iron sights and you only run iron sights for the whole time that you've been playing Rainbow Six Siege. If that is you then, well played, because you've probably used some of the worst iron sights in the game. But aside from that, I'm going to be giving you the top 5 different reticle colors in Rainbow Six Siege. I'm going to be giving you the ones that you need to be using in the game right now and the different opacities that you need to be running with it. If you are looking to find your go-to one, which is currently the meta right now and what a lot of people are going to be using, or you want to try some different ones that could be really good, I will be giving you them all today. If this video does help you out, be sure to drop a like on it, or if you end up liking any of the reticle colors I show you, and be sure to comment down below which one is your favorite. And let's dive into the top 5 best reticle colors in Siege. Now there are a few things that have gone into this. First of all, it's going to be general color theory. There are in general life a few colors that do stand out particularly well, and I've applied it to this. On top of that, I'll also be taking into account the different sites that you can actually use, the different maps and the kind of lighting on them, and as well how it does fare in the light areas and the darker areas of each map. So whichever one you do end up picking is going to fit you for a lot of circumstances. These are in no order, and the first one is going to be white. Now when you end up going for white, I would recommend you to run it to 60 to 90 opacity. Now, by all means, there are many different recommendations and actual combinations that you can use for your opacity. Some people do like to run this at 20. However, I would judge it off this opacity for me personally, but something else might fit you a little better. White is going to be so good for a lot of circumstances. First of all, if you are having the thought of white not be great on a map like Chalet because it's got snow, well actually the white colour at 90 opacity is going to stand out very highly. You will have no trouble when running this. Now in the darker areas of the map, white is going to thrive really well here because it's a contrast between black and white. When we're viewing this with our vision, that usually works out quite well. For the lighter areas of the map, similarly like the snow did, it is still going to stand out very well and easy to see. A complication a few players might have is when they use something like this, they might bring more attention to the reticle than actually needed. It might be a little bit too bright. Therefore, you can turn it down to the 60 opacity, which is going to iron this out for you. That's why I've included that range there. Next up, we're going to be moving on to green. And for the green reticle, I would recommend something in between 60 to 90 opacity. Green is actually a colour that stands out a lot to us humans. It is a colour that is going to allow us to see things from a long distance because of its vibrancy. And on paper, and when you look at the statistics, it is going to stand out the most. But again, you've also got to remember that for some people, you might not want it to be all the way up at 90 because that is going to be a little bit too high for you. A lot of people do struggle with it when it brings too much attention to the reticle. Therefore, running it at 60 opacity is going to be a nice balance between you, and I have checked and I can assure you that running it at the 60 opacity is going to be definitely bright enough. It is kind of perfect. And a massive factor that you also need to take into account is are many objects going to be the same colour that are actually in the map, the same colour as the reticle itself, and there aren't many green objects in each map for Rainbow Six Siege. Hence why this one is going to be so useful for you. Well, that is until Tachanka's Elite comes along and he turns out to be a full bright green operator. Yep, you heard me right, Tachanka's evolved into his final form, an alien. Anyway, fingers crossed that Tachanka isn't going to turn into an alien anytime soon, and that we won't have to worry about this when picking our reticle colour. And typically a brighter colour like green is going to stand out quite well in those light areas, but also those darker areas. Now on certain maps where it might be really light, the green on a 60 opacity might be a little bit harder to see. So also taking into account the actual map is going to help as well. And then we move on to the next one, which is going to be turquoise. Now this has been an extremely popular one, with many pro players also using this one too. When testing it around at the start of the season when the test server was actually live, it did feel like a very strong reticle colour. And bearing in mind this isn't your typical colour that you know is going to be really strong for you. It doesn't follow the such bright colours like a green or a purple or a red for example. However, turquoise is actually a really strong balance what you need, and I would recommend running this one at 70 to 90 opacity. Due to it being slightly less vibrant than other colours such as green, I would recommend having it at 70 as the lowest because you do want to make sure it is still showing up and you can see it. And as well, the colour cyan is also very strong for us to see. It is a very effective colour for us to actually look at and stand out. And then when you transfer this all the way over to Siege, you can kind of see why it does so well. Now, if there is a colour reticle combination that I haven't mentioned so far, be sure to drop it down below in the comments, because I know there are a lot out there that you are liking, and there could be many different combinations we don't know about. Now, the next colour on the reticle list is going to be yellow. and I would recommend running this one at a 60 to 90 opacity. Personally, myself, I like to run this one at 75. This has been a slightly less popular one used, but I do think it is still quite strong. Now, similar to green, yellow is another colour that stands out really quite well when compared to other objects, and in real life too. That's why we've got high-vis jackets, and they are a yellow colour. Now, another factor of yellow is that it actually irritates our eyes. I'm sure you all know this too. When you think about it, if you were to look at a block of yellow colour, and it is quite bright, and it's your standard bright yellow colour, it is going to be very hard to look at. This typically happens when you are a lot more up close to it, therefore you might find this in Siege when you are going to be using it, it might get a little bit too much for you. But remember, this is all personal preference, because some people are going to like it being really bright and it stands out because it's not going to irritate their eyes, but other people might want it a bit lower because it's going to be a more calmer colour to look at. So take these 4 colours that I've covered so far, and you can use them yourself and play around with the opacities. Now, typically when looking at the lighter areas of the map, the yellow was quite hard to see. If I was to look up to the sky, for example, the yellow is a little bit harder to see, but in those shadowy areas where it is going to be a tad darker, it is very effective. Because again, a high-vis jacket would typically be used in the dark. If you have found any value from these different reticle colours that I've showcased so far, be sure to check if you are subscribed down below, because sometimes you might not actually be when you do think you are. And now we move on to the final reticle colour, which is going to be purple. And for this one, I would recommend a 50 to 80 opacity. I myself used a 70 opacity when running it. Now, the reason this one is going to be at 50 opacity for the lowest recommended in my eyes is because this purple colour is very, very fluorescent and bright. But you've also, when lowering this opacity, got to take into account, can you actually still see that reticle? Do you need to see that reticle? And at 50 opacity, you can very clearly see it, and it is very useful to have this, because it isn't going to be as bright of a colour. Now again, with purple being a little bit of a brighter colour, it is going to be a tad harder to see in those really, really bright areas, but for the most part, it is very effective. And then for the darker areas where the shadows are going to be, purple is extremely effective to see your enemy. Now, you do in fact have a total of 13 different reticle colours to pick from. Now, these specifically are going to be light blue, regular blue, turquoise, green, light green, yellow, light orange, orange, red, pink, white, and black. And the opacity scale range is going to range from 20 all the way up to 100. Now, an honourable mention has got to go out to red. Red is a fantastic colour, and in real life it is commonly used on weapon scopes. Red is very easy to track different targets for, and red does stand out as well. Definitely one to pick up on top of that. By any chance, if you do want to go a little bit off course and look for some yourself and find different ones as well, I would recommend taking a few factors into account. First of all, you want to be seeing how they are going to be comparing to the light areas and the more darker areas of each map. As well, take into account the maps. A map like Coastline is going to depend on different colours because the map is mostly a white building. And as well, it also is going to come down to your personal preference, because a colour might be a little bit too bright for you when comparing it to someone else. I hope this list of the top 5 reticle colours in Rainbow Six Siege did help you out. If it did, be sure to drop a like on the video, or if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more tips and tricks videos just like this one. I hope you all have an incredible rest of your day, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.